Okay class, in this short video, we will be learning about the Andes Mountains that are not only found in South America, but are also found in Peru. To begin, let's learn about where the Andes Mountains are found. So, the Andes Mountains run through the following countries. They run through Colombia, they run through Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, and parts of Argentina. So they are found in those 6 countries. Now, the Andes Mountains are the longest chain of mountains in the world and the second tallest after the Himalayas. So, these are the longest mountains in the world, longest mountain chain, and they even run up in parts of Venezuela, on the border, and then it goes all the way down pretty much to the tip of South America, and that is how long the Andes Mountains are. Now, these mountains are found on the western side of South America, and they run a distance of 4,500 miles long. That's how long these mountains are. Now, many of the peaks or mountaintops found in the Andes reach over 20,000 feet in elevation. That is very, very high up. Now, some of the tallest peaks include Mount Aconcagua, which is the tallest mountain in all the Andes at 22,834 feet tall. And then you have Mount Huarascan, which is the tallest mountain in Peru, and that has a elevation of 22,205 feet. The image here on the left is a panoramic or an overtop view of Mount Aconcagua, and then the one on the right is a picture of Mount Huarascan. Now, the Andes has some of the world's tallest mountains, and as I said before, some of them are over 20,000 feet above sea level. Just to kind of give you an idea, Mount Huarascan would probably be about here at 22,205. So it's relatively high. So that would be considered an extreme altitude, according to this picture. And we would actually start to get very sick at this height if we were to go there without acclimatizing or getting used to the altitude. First, let's talk about Mount Aconcagua. Mount Aconcagua is the tallest mountain in South America, and it is also found in the Andes Mountains. Mount Aconcagua is actually found in Argentina, and it has an elevation of 22,834 feet above sea level. As I mentioned before, the only mountain that is taller than this mountain is Mount Everest, which kind of gives you an idea how tall the mountains are. Mount Huarascan is also found in the Andes Mountains, and this mountain is found in the country of Peru. And it's very similar to Mount Aconcagua, but this mountain has an elevation of 22,205 feet. And these are just some images of this mountain. Now, weather patterns. It may seem hard to believe, and I cannot make this stuff up, the Andes Mountains also influence the climate of South America. The Andes act as a wall or a barrier. So here I am kind of outlining the Andes Mountains. And these act as a wall or barrier, and it keeps the wet, humid air from the Amazon rainforest from reaching the western part of South America. So all this huge, hot, humid air is that, imagine when we talk about humid, when the air is sticky, kind of in July and August here in Nebraska, that's what that is. So it acts as a barrier or wall. So it stops all that wet air from going into this part that I'm shading blue. And it actually prevents a lot of moisture from getting to this part of South America. So the area that I just shaded in blue And since the western part of Peru is actually very dry desert, which explains why parts of Lima, Ica, Chiclayo, and Trujillo are very hot areas. Here you have kind of another aerial. Here you have an aerial view of the Andes Mountains. And these mountains are kind of like this. Now, let's talk about some rivers. Now, the Andes are a starting point for many large rivers found throughout South America, because most, if not all, rivers start at higher elevations and then they kind of work their way down with gravity. One of these rivers you are probably very familiar with, and that is the Amazon River. You have the Orinoco River and the Paraná River, and there are a lot of other smaller rivers as well. Now, over the centuries, many cities have been established or founded or built in the Andes Mountains, regardless of the elevation. So, for whatever reason, it didn't matter that these cities were high up in the mountains. Some of these cities that were built probably had silver or some type of mineral that the early settlers moved to find there. Some of these cities are actually major cities within South America. So one of these major cities is Bogota, which is the capital of Colombia. Quito, which is found in Ecuador. Also the capital city. Cusco, Peru. A very large city. La Paz, Bolivia. Very large city as well. Huancayo and Medellin, Colombia. So these are all very large cities found within the Andes Mountains, and a lot of large populations live there. Now, one of the last things we're going to discuss is to talk about how people have adapted to the high elevations. Now, the Andes Mountains are actually broken into 4 different zones. We're not gonna worry about Tierra Nevada. We're just gonna talk about these 4 ones. The first one's Tierra Caliente, Tierra Templada, Tierra Fría, and Tierra Helada. Now, each one of those, if I translate it, Tierra Caliente means hot land. That means it's warmer. Tierra Templada is temperate, meaning that it's kind of in the middle. Tierra Fría, cold. And then Tierra Helada is frozen land. Now, each zone has its own climate, vegetation, and humans have adapted to them differently. And we're going to talk about each individual one. Alright, so Tierra Caliente is at the bottom of all mountains here in the Andes. And this area has a warmer climate, which explains why tropical rainforests can be found here. So in this area you have tropical rainforests. People here wear warmer clothing, live in houses that don't necessarily need heaters because it is warm all year. It's warm all year round here, and they grow or farm tropical crops like bananas, which require hot temperatures or climates, and sugarcane, which also requires a lot of rain and hot temperatures to grow. Now, Tierra Templada, this one's kind of the one in the middle, so to speak. This is the most populated zone, and that's partly because the temperature tends to be kind of in the middle, cool in the mornings, and then hot in the afternoons. Now, in this region, they grow coffee, corn, and wheat. And in this area, their adaptation is having houses that are a little more warmer than the ones in the Tierra Caliente. And as I mentioned earlier, their climate tends to be a little cooler. So one thing you'll notice is that the higher you climb in elevation, the colder it gets. Now, the next one, and this one we'll probably spend a majority of our time talking about, and that's Tierra Fria. In this zone, the temperature really starts to drop. Some cases you will have to have a light jacket or even a heavy sweater. So many people here, because of the cooler temperatures, they wear clothes that is made from wool. Now, this is where the llama, alpacas, and vicuñas really play a major part here. From the llamas, because they use a lot of that wool to make their clothes. Now, these guys have also adapted their farming techniques by using terraces to farm in the colder and rocky terrain. So if you remember down below, when we talked about terracing, they kind of went in there, cleared away these mountains, and created flat land that allowed them to farm in this tough and rocky terrain. Now, with this being said, in this area, you're not going to grow a lot of vegetables or crops, but you will be able to grow barley and potatoes. And lastly, you have Tierra Helada. Now, this zone is the coldest and the hardest zone to live in. Due to the elevation, very few people actually live up there. So unlike the previous 3 layers, you had people sprinkled throughout the mountain, and now you will have almost no one up here because the oxygen there's not enough oxygen. It's super cold. Crops or trees don't grow here. So because of that, almost no farming takes place. As you can see at the picture down below, there's no trees here. It's essentially cleared away, just some grasses, some low shrubs, but nothing too big, and that's because of the elevation. Now, the one thing that this area is used for is for the mining for gold, silver, and copper, and other minerals. Now, we'll talk more about the minerals that are found in Peru later on, but just be aware that these things are also found here. So, that's all I have. Just a few things about the Andes Mountains, where it's found, what countries run through it, some of the different adaptations that people have had to make when it comes to living in this very rough terrain. So, just like always, if you have any questions, let me know. Thank you.